Star Wars Zero Company has put turn-based tactics firmly back in the spotlight, but there is an enormous world beyond the galaxy far, far away. Today we got 20 tactical games worth playing in 2026. We're ranging from overlooked indie gems to older classics transformed by updates and mods, so there should be something for everyone here. We're LT Gaming and my name is Tom. We are two brothers obsessed with finding the best games for you. So be sure to give the video a like and let YouTube know turn-based tactics is back. Alright, let's get straight into it. Kicking us off is Tactical Breach Wizards, a game that answers the important question absolutely no one has asked. What if a police breach team had magic, bit of questionable judgment, and an unhealthy enthusiasm for Windows? Each encounter is a tightly designed tactical puzzle. You can see what enemies are preparing to do and freely experiment with your wizard's abilities to try and counteract it. The real joy comes from combining all these abilities, redirecting attacks, swapping positions, and creating elaborate magical chain reactions. It's definitely a much tighter, more story-driven experience than something like XCOM without the base building and disposable soldiers. Tactical Breach Wizards is clever, compact, and I gotta say, an excellent game. So from something compact and story driven to one of the genre's absolute juggernaut series, and I'm going with XCOM 2 here. It turns 10 in 2026 and yet remains the benchmark that every squad-based tactics game is compared against. The thing I like with this game, and sometimes hate, is I become very attached to my soldiers. That rookie who gradually becomes the ranger carrying your entire campaign. And when they eventually die, it feels more than just losing a unit in a game. You want to organize a small military funeral. If you pick this up, definitely get War of the Chosen as well. It adds new factions and flavor into the game. But the real reason to return in 2026 is the modding scene. I'll shout out the Star Wars Total Conversion mod based upon my intro. There's a huge amount of depth and flavor here. The base game is exceptional, but with mods it's almost endlessly replayable. Next is Cyberknight's Flashpoint from the Treasy brothers, the developers behind one of my favorite games, Star Traders Frontiers, just a studio I really love. This is a deep cyberpunk tactical RPG built around assembling a crew of mercenaries and planning increasingly dangerous corporate heists. It doesn't have the lavish presentation of a AAA release, but mechanically it runs rings around other games with considerably larger budgets. Your squad feels personal, the RPG systems have real depth, and operations give you several viable ways to approach it. What is impressive to me in 2026 is the love the Tracy brothers give their games. Meaningful updates continue to arrive, and they're remarkably active with their community. One of the finest indie tactical RPGs I have played. Moving away from individuals towards entire battlefronts, we have Panzer Corps 2. I've been on a proper Panzer Corps run this year, largely thanks to the steady barrage of new DLC. Allied operations in Italy, Soviet First Guard, All-American campaign have added even more variety to the biggest World War II tactical game out there. Presentation is clean and approachable, but beneath those hexes is a truly excellent tactical war game. Terrain spotting, weather, encirclements, and unit matchups all matter. There's no elaborate character stories or magical abilities here. The satisfaction comes from studying the battlefield, identifying the weak points, and executing upon your plan. Now for something completely different, Renowned Explorers. It's one of those games I can reinstall years later and immediately lose my entire weekend to. It's charming, wonderfully colourful, and somehow it's not really touched by time. You assemble a crew of 3 eccentric explorers before travelling across a fictional 19th century world in search of treasure, scientific discoveries, and a bit of fame along the way. Tactical encounters are what make this game special. Problems can be handled aggressively, deviously, or you can be friendly. You can punch an enemy, you can terrify them with insults, or you can just be relentlessly encouraging. This game just oozes charm. I remember when the late Total Biscuit championed this game, and I love to hear that the developers later revealed that this actually helped make the game a success, and it's a lovely legacy for a delightful tactical game. Jagged Alliance 3 was on the channel some time ago, and it was one of my first experiences with the series. So no nostalgia tinted glasses here, I just found it a bloody good tactical game. It has the familiar appeal of XCOM-style combat with a more open campaign structure and a lot greater freedom of where your squads go next. Positioning, aim shots, stealth, environmental destruction, you've got it all here. With a sizable campaign and the official modding tools extending its replayability, Jagged Alliance 3 is an easy one to recommend. Luke loved Mechanicus 2 when he reviewed it, but the wider audience rather brutally slaughtered it. I never got my hands on it, so I'm happy to throw him under the bus here and put the first Mechanicus in. Now, we love a bit of Warhammer 40k here at the channel, and being put in command of the Adeptus Mechanicus while you explore a Necron tomb world is absolutely stellar stuff. Combat is built around cognition points, which you collect and spend on movement and your powerful abilities. Combine this with the different tech priest disciplines and there's a lot of freedom with this game. Now, don't get me wrong, this game is not reinventing turn-based tactics, but it does understand the 40k universe. The writing, the chanting, the frankly outrageous soundtrack really channels the universe. A great pick for anyone though. Battle Brothers isn't merely one of the best turn-based tactics games available, it might be the finest low fantasy mercenary game ever made. You begin with a handful of nobodies, hopefuls, and they wander into this procedurally generated medieval world, and you start taking on contracts that look least likely to get everyone killed. The learning curve for me feels closer to a roguelike. Your first company is going to die. The next will survive slightly longer, and so on and so forth. You gotta understand weapon matchups, armor, fatigue, morale, terrain, and precisely which profitable contract is actually worth going for. The brutality makes it feel incredibly rewarding though. It is demanding and occasionally merciless, but once its systems click, Battle Brothers delivers tactical depth and emergent storytelling that very few games can match. Expeditions Rome sits somewhere between a tactical RPG, a historical adventure, and a full military campaign. You create your own Roman, you build a party of companions and fight across Greece, North Africa, and Gaul, while commanding a legion on the wider campaign map. The turn-based combat was a highlight for me. Encounters feel like tactical puzzles, particularly once you start unlocking more equipment and begin combining your character abilities properly. Companions are well written and carry their own secrets, although missions involving generic Praetorians can sometimes lose that emotional investment. Legion management is also a touch awkward, but those frustrations aside, I do think Expeditions Rome delivers an excellent tactical combat and a pretty convincing fantasy of commanding your own legion. Apparently one Warhammer 40k game wasn't enough for this list, but in our defense, you know what we're like with this universe. Battlesector is probably the closest I've found to translating the tabletop wargame directly onto PC. You assemble your army, choose units, loadouts, then fight for mission-based objectives. The models and animations are excellent. Its momentum system rewards aggressive thematic play, and army customization gives you plenty to consider before you ever even fire a bolter. Battlesector has grown enormously since launch, and there's a lot of factions to dive into now. If you love Warhammer 40k and you want the experience of commanding its armies without painting several hundred tiny little shoulder pads, Battlesector is definitely your play. Quick tactical pulls: if you do like good games, and I'm assuming you do because you made it this far into the list, you should probably be subscribed. We bring you thoughtful recommendations, the finest gaming takes, and the occasional opinion Luke and I will continue arguing about long after the recordings have ended. Alrighty, enough of that, back to the list. If Firaxis' XCOM is the modern reinvention, Xenonauts 2 is for people who still miss the colder, more methodical style of the older games. When it first entered early access, I liked what was here and I put it on the channel, but it's been continuously developed over time, and I think it's a much more stronger complete game now. You manage an entire global defense network, building specialized bases, researching a bit of captured technology, and intercepting UFOs, standard stuff really. Combat remains deliberately unforgiving though. Ammunition, sightlines, destructible environments, and careful reconnaissance all matter. Xenonauts 2 doesn't do anything wildly revolutionary, but that's the ambition. It faithfully recreates the tension and depth of the old style games, but modernizes its rougher edges. Demeo is essentially what happens when you take a tabletop dungeon crawler, remove 3 hours of setup, and leave only the entertaining arguments with your friends. Luke and I have had a great deal of fun playing this one together. Up to 4 players choose distinct characters, classes, and move miniatures around a beautifully presented dungeon board. You use ability cards to survive whatever horrible collection of monsters the game has conjured up for you, and you have an absolute blast. Now, accessibility is a strength and weakness here. Compared with other games like Gloomhaven, there's less setup, less persistent progression or narrative baggage. Its adventures are almost entirely structured like roguelike dungeon runs. It won't replace a deeper campaign game, but for an evening with some friends, this is tremendously good fun. Wasteland 3 could be an exceptional game, but a few unnecessary frustrations can make this a little bit annoying. It's in frozen Colorado, and this setting is wonderfully realised. Combat is very strong. You build a specialised 6-person ranger squad, you can experiment with unusual weapons, positioning, and make some truly excellent tactical encounters. Unfortunately, the game makes experimenting with this build increasingly expensive through its respec system. There is a bit of familiar roughness around the CRPG elements, the AI, interface and leveling style of things, but it doesn't overwhelm what Wasteland 3 gets right. It remains an excellent tactical RPG that is worthy of anyone's time. Luke and I debated whether Baldur's Gate 3 belongs on a turn-based tactical list. I fundamentally think it does. Luke disagreed, but fortunately this is my list, so he can complain in the comments below. Beneath this enormous RPG is an excellent tactical combat system. Classes, subclasses, multi-classing, equipment, hundreds of abilities to give you ridiculous freedom. I particularly like the first 2 acts of this game. Battles feel a bit more dangerous and your choices matter, and a poor plan can leave you in an absolute state. The power curve after that becomes a little bit less controlled, and narratively I wasn't as big a fan of the story then, but even with those caveats, Baldur's Gate 3 offers extraordinary tactical freedom inside one of gaming's finest RPG adventures. BattleTech combines turn-based tactics with the considerably more terrifying challenge of running a small business. You manage a mercenary company, negotiate contracts, hire pilots, and keep your ship operational before deploying your 4 battle mechs into combat. It can be intimidating at first. Battle order, positioning, weapon ranges all need to click before everything truly opens up. Most importantly, the battles sell the scale. Weapons thunder, armor explodes, enormous machines topple over into the dirt. For turn-based tactics within the BattleTech universe, Harebrained Scheme's adaptation is extremely compelling. Blood Bowl 2 takes American football, which I don't really get because they barely kick the bloody thing, and replaces sensible health and safety regulations with the Warhammer fantasy universe and produces an excellent tactics game. Each turn becomes an exercise in risk management essentially, positioning your players, creating openings, and deciding which actions are essential before attempting that Hail Mary pass that ends up with your player unconscious. The Legendary Edition includes 24 races, and they all have distinct styles of play. Luke and I have had an absolute blast playing matches against each other. It can be buggy, the interface has its awkward moments, but we still have a bloody good time. Now with Slytherin taking over the Blood Bowl franchise, I think the future is bright once again. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock comes with an enormous caveat unfortunately. If you don't already own it, finding a copy in this day and age is a challenge on its own. And that's a damn shame because it remains one of the best turn-based space combat games around. Deadlock uses a brilliant simultaneous turn system, issuing orders to every ship, accounting for altitude, armor facings, firing arcs, missiles, and even fighter squadrons. The slower pace and learning curve will not suit everyone, but its battles are thoughtful, visually spectacular, and a wonderfully faithful adaptation to Battlestar Galactica. Sadly, Deadlock and all its DLC were removed from every digital storefront in November 25, but if you already own it, dig it out, it's a classic. The Troop is something of an occupational hazard for LT gaming. Luke absolutely adores it, and I've repeatedly had to drag him away this year to make a sodden video. Rather than asking you to command an entire front, the Troop focuses on platoon level battles across Normandy. The strength of this game is clarity. Line of sight, terrain, armor facing, and positioning determine almost everything, and you have complete control over each unit. The AI follows the same restrictions as the player and can vary its deployments between attempts, and this makes engagements feel challenging without feeling a bit artificially rigged. Story missions, persistent campaigns, skirmishes, dynamic battle groups, there's plenty beyond isolated scenarios as well. If thoughtful World War II tactics is your thing, this is an excellent choice. Next is Darkest Dungeon, a game whose narrator will remain in my head until my final days, solemnly recounting every poor decision and tragic failure along the way. This is turn-based punishment delivered with some extraordinary style. It's not just managing health and damage, you deal with stress, disease, darkness, and a collection of deeply unstable heroes. Every expedition becomes a calculation. How much further can you push? Is that final room worth risking my hero who's on the absolute edge? Can everything go catastrophically wrong? And for me it usually does. I enjoyed the original far more than the sequel, and I still return to it whenever life has been going very well and I fancy being humbled. It is bleak, brutal, and occasionally deeply unfair, but few tactical RPGs create this much atmosphere and make failure quite so compelling. Menace comes from the developers of Battle Brothers, only this time they've swapped miserable medieval mercenaries for miserable marines, but thankfully they have not lost their tactical edge. This game passed us over a little bit at launch, but now I've been digging into it, I am finding it very good. The squad system is particularly clever. Your named leaders command groups of soldiers who effectively act as the unit's health, so casualties gradually reduce its combat effectiveness rather than just simply removing a chunk from a health bar. I also find vehicles a lot of fun, powerful when used properly, but vulnerable enough that you can't simply roll forward and call it strategy. There are some clear early access rough edges, line of sight feels a little bit inconsistent, and there's some balancing issues around wounded soldiers and vehicles needed to be made as well. Even so, I think the tactical foundations here are excellent, and the devs remain very active. Menace isn't finished, but it could be one of the easiest recommendations on this list. And finishing off this list is Burden of Command. Gamers, my older, increasingly cynical self included here, we're always asking for something genuinely different. So when a game like this comes along, we would be absolutely daft to ignore it. Burden of Command is a slower, more thoughtful World War II tactics game built around leadership rather than simply winning battles. You follow a set historical path, but you're given a lot of freedom in how to approach situations. It does demand your attention though. Don't just skip over all the dialogue and rush the text. Writing and character development are a huge part of what make this game work. The unusual pacing captures something most war games miss in my opinion. Long periods of tension broken up by some horrible moments where everything can unravel for you. It's not for everyone, but you want something challenging, immersive, and very original, Burden of Command deserves your attention. And that is our list, but I know, we have missed a few. But in true Darkest Dungeon fashion, digging any deeper would have probably cost me the last shred of my sanity. This is what comments are for. What are you playing at the moment? Which tactical gem did we completely overlook? And probably most dangerously, which games do you not even consider turn-based tactics? Let's have it out in the comments, friends. Unleash your tactical knowledge upon me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye now.